President Bola Tinubu is seeking the approval of the Nigerian Senate to borrow $7.8 billion and 100 million euros in his fresh borrowing plan for the period 2022 to 2024. Now, this has actually been planned out by his predecessor, President Muhammadu Buhari, to mitigate the effects of fuel subsidy removal. The president has also read the Riot Act to his cabinet: perform or be removed. He gave this charge at the opening of the three-day ministerial retreat, which is closing today in Abuja at the presidential villa. Commodity prices are not smiling just as the budget debate continues to gain steam. But let me inform you that this Wednesday, the Nigerian Oil Share Index of the exchange group climbed above $70,000, historic heights that has never been achieved before. And this is on the back of corporate earnings that boosted gains. But on the flip side, Morgan Stanley Capital International has reclassified Nigerian indexes from frontier markets to stand alone, and it is on the back of persistent foreign exchange concerns. On the program today, we shall be delving into the foreign exchange concern and, of course, the inclusive growth and sustainability path Nigeria is seeking. Do well to stick around because we have the complimentary segments for you, Simplified Ease and Market Roundups. My name is Leah and this is The Policy. Now let's start the business of the day with a roundup of major happenings in the economy in the course of the week. The Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, says there is currently no plan by the bank to restructure and redenominate the Naira. The Apex Bank, in a statement signed by its Director Corporate Communications, Issa Abdulmumin, said that it is concerned that the narrative which they had refuted before now appears to be gaining traction, with several debates on the implications of such a policy for the Nigerian economy. The statement reiterated that the content of the message are misleading and the authors of the message in the mischief modified text obtained from an old policy move by a previous CBN governor in 2007 to make it appear recent. Abdulmumin stated that while the bank may be considering reforms such as subject to laid down procedures in line with the provisions of the CBN Act 2007, he advised the public to ignore the news and as it is speculative and calculated to cause panic. President Bola Tinubu has sought the approval of the Nigerian Senate for the 2024 to 2026 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework (MTEF) and Fiscal Strategy Paper (FSP). Tinubu's request is contained in a letter addressed to the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, and read at plenary this Tuesday. Akpabio referred the MTEF and FSP to committees on finance, appropriations, national planning and economic affairs, and local and foreign debt for further legislative input. Both chambers of the National Assembly have passed a supplementary budget of 2.17 trillion naira for the year 2023, earlier approved by the Federal Executive Council. Atiku Bagudu, Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, revealed that the supplementary budget will be used to fund urgent national issues, including a 605 billion naira allocation for security and national defense to sustain recorded gains. The Nigerian Senate has confirmed and approved the nomination of Zak Adedeji as chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service (FIRS). Adedeji, who had resumed in acting capacity after taking over from his predecessor Mohammed Nami, promised to improve data mining capacity of the agency to make appropriate tax decisions. Also confirmed and approved by the Senate is the nomination of Shekar Chira as Auditor General for the Federation. Chira will be manning the office of the Auditor General for the Federation that had been vacant for over a year since the retirement of Adolphus Agogo in September 7, 2022. The Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDEN, will structure at least 1 million startups in the north to make them better prepared for easy access to funding, which is a serious challenge to MSMEs in the country. Charles Odi, Director General of SMEDEN, who made the commitment during an interactive session at the 2023 Startup Iowa Innovation Summit, said he will be working with the conveners of the summit, the 8 in the series, to achieve the target, a move he believes will reduce the jobs and skills gap in the country. The summit, which held in Abuja, had the theme Building Sustainable Tech Ecosystems, Lessons from the North.
Not just us doing the trainings, people like Iowa Startup, getting them into our system, getting them licensed as business development service providers so that they can, in their own communities, start to so the value chain, so that they can start to train these small businesses on better structuring to access funding, on their business models, using different business model methods, and on global best practices.
An escalation of the latest conflict in the Middle East, which comes on top of disruptions caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, could push global commodity markets into uncharted waters, although the global economy is in a much better position than it was in the 1970s to cope with a major oil price shock. This is according to the World Bank in its latest commodity markets outlook. Under the bank's baseline forecast, oil prices are expected to average $90 a barrel in the current quarter before declining to an average of $81 a barrel next year as global economic growth slows. Overall, commodity prices are projected to fall 4.1% next year. Prices of agricultural commodities are expected to decline next year as supplies rise. Prices of base metals are also projected to drop 5% in 2024. Oil prices have risen about 6% since the start of the conflict. Making targeted policies work is the focus of our discussion. And just last week on the sidelines of the Nigerian Economic Summit, the 29th edition, in this series I had this sideline conversation with the CEO Designate of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Dr. Tayo Aduloju. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you so much for having us.
And perhaps I start by asking you this particular question because I'm very interested in issues that have to do with younger persons and inclusion. And so why is inclusion critical in policy making?
The theme of the summit, which is pathways for sustainable economic transformation and inclusion, is three things. One, it is looking at the evidence. The evidence from the data says that we've had a decade of low growth. And even when the economy was growing high in the first decade of this millennium, that growth was not inclusive. It did not create jobs. Actually, it took people into poverty. Mm-hmm. So you can have jobs that are for the working poor. So the jobs don't lift them out of poverty. Actually, the jobs guarantee that they will remain in a perpetual state of poverty. So we are looking for growth that is one, high, that is inclusive, that is within a high employment environment, but in an environment that reduces the overall risk to Nigerians. Now, when you now look at economic transformation as it has to do with the structure of the economy, because economic transformation is a process by which you're changing the very structure of the economy. And in our particular case, some things need to change. One, we do not. People keep saying that, FX is interest rates is driving us crazy, but you can't have FX if you don't earn FX. And it's very simple. If you don't earn FX, it won't show that you have FX. So with Nigeria has a liquidity problem. Now, to solve that problem, you must shift the economy from a net spender of foreign exchange to a net earner of FX. Now, when you look at FX, there are several types of FX, of course. There's FX that would have just come as foreign direct investment, FX that comes from diaspora remittances. There'll be portfolio investments, as the case may be. And then there can be FX from debt financing by borrowing. Okay, in the last 2 decades, between 2 recessions and 1 pandemic, we borrowed. So we got out of recession by borrowing ourselves out of recession. And then people are wondering why we are broke. You're broke because we basically spend money borrowing. So if you want to solve that kind of problem, you have to, one, at least define a clear path that takes you out. And then define a clear set of strategies making it happen. You know, on the other side of the summit theme is inclusion. Now, inclusion, like I said, several people have already been left behind.
Yeah.
And to bring those people that have been left behind onto the social program of government, you have to basically look for what does the data tell you is the most vulnerable groups of people in Nigeria. And this is something I like about what the president said. He spoke about house helps. He spoke about that's your basic earners who are not able to cope by themselves. He spoke about civil servants who are earning at a nominal rate below any capacity for a cost of living. He spoke about not being able to buy, no mortgage to buy cars, houses, etc. To finance, no credit finance cars, mortgage to buy houses, etc. I think what the president is speaking to is if you want an inclusive society where so many of us are left behind, reforms must come to create drivers of inclusion. I think he made a big point about credit culture and the transformation of the financial system to deepen financial access to these segments that are left behind as a key way to redirect the challenge and focus on the solution.
But if I may come in here, do you see Nigeria as a country that is ready for the kind of credit culture that the president talked about?
Well, we don't have a choice because what are the alternatives is that you will dash Nigerians' money again through some type of a social investment program, right? Will that solve the problem? You know, so I think that the idea of a credit culture where productive adults can draw credit to run businesses, so that's a more viable way to think about, you know, those opportunities. You know, so I think that ultimately you're discussing for each Nigerian, how do you improve quality of living, standard of living, how do you expand the food the household food basket, and how do you deepen consumption rate in the right direction? And what will be the drivers of that? Will it be jobs?
Okay, so while we're talking about looking at the jobs now and of course the opportunities, I would like to just ask you this. Last year we had some sessions dedicated to young persons. The previous year too, we had those kinds of sessions. What did you find?
Well, the thing about any session at the summit is that it does what it's meant to do, which is focus on an area, create a set of narratives, debate problems, reach consensus on solutions. Young people constitute a big part of our economy. In fact, by 2050, 67% of all Nigerians will be young. And at that time, if we don't go through a process of creating jobs for them, we could be standing alone in the dark, considering their number. The future is young, but it needs young people to come along, to play their part in development, to build entrepreneurial ecosystems that can attract capital, to build businesses that scale, you know, as the case may be. And then maybe that will be the trigger, okay, for a real, you know, revolution, as it were. And most of these businesses started by young people are informal, if anything else. You know, so the formalization of the informal sector is another big elephant in the room, as the case may be.
How would you suggest Nigeria takes a look into these policy issues? Do we say multi-pronged approach, sectoral approach, or the whole gamut of the policy scheme itself?
Well, there's no easy way out. I think
because
when
Nigerians are actually interested in the easy way out.
I think when we met with the president in February of 2023, the NESG board was very clear. There are tough choices ahead. There are no easy answers to meet. And if you want to succeed, you have to meet those tough choices.
So, tough choices.
Yeah.
So if we're going to talk the tough choices, and now before I let you leave, what will be one of those tough choices that Nigerians should be prepared for?
I think the president has made two very tough choices back to back: unification of FX and fuel subsidy. But here's the problem: if you remove subsidy, you create a knock-on effect on inflation. Knock-on effect of inflation requires that the market regulators regulate the price of goods and services in certain parts of Nigeria at that cost. Now, what needs to happen, or what we must see more of, is we must see people basically become more productive. It's productive people that pay taxes.
Oh yeah.
It's productive people that take money home and pay their children's fees, that pay their wives to go to the market, and it's all those things they do. They basically move around that creates taxation, which is one form of cash flow. So one of the ways to think about these things is that as productive people, or as people that want to be productive, we can be driven to reach high levels of productivity, and we can tax that level of productivity. How do you drive productivity? For example, if you want to improve the productivity of agriculture, reduce post-harvest losses. 65% of all Nigerian primary produce on the farms is lost in post-harvest losses. That's something where if you just improved the output, you could improve the productivity of agriculture. Now imagine, for example, that we then said, no, let's, instead of taking ordinary seeds, let's give all you farmers high-yield seeds, right? That will change the productivity level per hectare just by itself, right? So now it's possible that farmer to be comfortable saying, on 1 hectare of land, have delivered higher levels of productivity for the same 1 hectare with a different type of seed. Now imagine that we then said, we're going to give a farmer a tractor. Now the farmer used to take 3 months to cultivate 1 hectare, can now in 3 months cultivate 10 hectares, right? Again, I've changed the productivity level of the same smallholder farmer. Now, what is changing is the productivity driver from low-yield seeds to high-yield seeds, right? Now, all these things are capability builders. And what we need is basically for every sector that could be more productive. So we need to look at those sectors and say, how do we produce more, not less jobs? Remember, you have a large, bulging population that is unemployed. So you must create high or labor-intensive jobs. These are sectors that have the capacity to absorb large numbers of employees. Then you need labor-elastic jobs, which is jobs that meet the quality requirement. Those jobs lift people out of poverty. Those jobs can pay your bills. Those jobs drive many other things in your life. So I think when we say productivity is about a jobs plan. Productivity is not a generic sort of conversation and say, oh, I got to bring money and somehow you will have some productivity. No, productivity has to be a strategy for the key sectors that drive the growth of those industries.
So, Doctor, lastly, if I think this should be my lastly now. In achieving this, the federal government is already saying this is the direction we want to go. What is the place of the states, the local governments, and of course the legislature in ensuring that this thing happens?
Well, the role of the local government is the closest government to the people. To be honest, if the local governments perform minimally, not even, minimally, they will find out that they can transform the lives of more communities. But that begins with simple conversations like, how much money does local government have in its budget? How will that money be focused on important things that drive productivity? Now imagine that every local government in Nigeria uses their money to buy a few tractors, the agricultural ones, and use that to clear the land, right? Instead of the farmers in their community spending, 2 months just clearing bush, right? Tractors have cleared the bush. Then they can go and start to plant. Now you've changed their productivity level. Yeah. So the thing about it is that productivity is a tangible intervention framework. You have to say our people will be put to work by us. And then once you've done that, you can now tie that, putting the people to work with the incentive of incremental pay, right? But if I'm not going to do anything and I'm going to be paid for doing nothing, then productivity will not rise. So I think that ultimately Nigeria needs to really think about the cost of productivity, when it will happen, and how much of it will happen.
Okay. Most sincerely, thank you, Doctor, for
making
time for this conversation.
Thanks.
My name is Aduloju Kori.
Keep watching the policy with Leah.
It aims to provide policymakers an opportunity to explain their policies in a way that members of the public affected by those policies can understand and engage with those policies.
Keep watching the policy with Leah.
It's time for some knowledge addition, and so let's simplify this for you and take you to the market square. For more on rates in markets across the country, do well to look into our sister website, www.marketnigeriatv.com. We end this episode here, but of course, this episode and every other one is available on our YouTube channel, sabanmediaservices.com. Do well to also send in your suggestions, comments, questions, and observations. You can also continue with the conversations via our various social media platforms. We return your way again next week, all things being equal, and of course, we'll try our best to make this a November to remember. Be safe out there, folks, and God bless Nigeria.